All right, welcome back. We are Game 2004. That's Game Engines 2 in the winter 2026 semester at Georgian, and it's week 6, part 2 of our broadcast and recording. And where last we left off, we talked a bunch of stuff. Everything from assignment 2, due dates, exam prep for next week, which is going to be your stuff that we're doing. What I said for those people who came a little late, please look at this first section. Is that next week we're going to have a practical exam assignment that will be remote. Okay, will not be physically in person, and that's because of my challenge right now. But now what we want to get into is lighting and exposure with Unreal Engine. So a couple things that we want to do is when does it happen? It happens typically when we move from interior to exterior or exterior to interior. What we want to do is we don't want the exposure to shift aggressively from one to the other. And the reason for this is because of Unreal Engine's built-in auto exposure. Okay, it does that from the get-go. So we're going to talk about a couple of things. And how do we control it? We're going to use our post-process effects volume. So if you actually look at the documentation for this, I invite you to look at it. By the way, again, like I said, the documentation is really great. It has 5.6 and 5.7 involved. Unreal Engine just released 5.7.3. So that's the latest version, which is pretty cool. Again, looking forward to working with probably 5.6.1 at the very minimum by this fall. Hopefully 5.8 will be out, and then if 5.8 comes out, we'll work with 5.7. There's a lot of great updates and enhancements that 5.7 brings, and not just templates but other things that are really great. And but for now, that's what they've done. And so this is for 5.5, and what it talks about is this post-process volume. So again, the documentation, I really like it. For Epic has provided some really great stuff, and we'll talk about it. So there's two things we really want to focus on: exposure and priority. Okay, so we're going to do this, those two things. Okay, because we're going to have two post-processing volumes we're going to make, one for exterior and one for interior, and we're going to make it so that the interior one, when you're inside that post-processing volume, it's going to take precedence over the exterior one. Okay, which is not something that we've talked about yet. So back to this, that's one thing. So this idea of localized post-process volumes, especially near transitions, right? So we can have as many of these post-processing volumes as we want, compared to just have one that's infinite extents. Okay, one that's infinite extents is great from an exterior perspective. But what happens when I want to move into the interior? I want to change the way the lighting works, and we can do that without any script. So we want to create this idea of a buffer zone, some kind of like transition from a corridor or a doorway, as an example, to the exterior. So let's work with I've got a copy here of week 5, and all I've done here is I've loaded up this scene. See if I can make this better. Well, you're going to see it however you're going to see it. I'm going to see if you can optimize for video, so you can see a little bit better in terms of better frame rate, I think, is what we're going to see. And this is the dungeon level that we had before. One thing about this level that I really like, there's lots of built-in things that you can use. Like, for example, this whole idea of a switch that we can use for opening and closing doors and that kind of stuff, or moving up and down elevators. There's a lot of stuff that this project comes with, right? Kind of off the top. One thing is, if you run this project, it's quite intensive, and the other thing is that see if I can actually do this to show you. The other thing is that when you're running the project, many times it'll tell you that you're running out of memory. Okay. And the reason for this is because the number of light volumes that they have in this dungeon project. Also, notice that, like how we just did that weird vibration there. Let me just do that again. right? So there's a spot there that you're colliding with that skeleton. It looks like, look at that. It's not perfect, okay? It's not perfect, but they've got some stuff in here that you know, works okay. So again, we're using our character from before, and you know, you can see how we can kind of move down this pretty large, fairly large level. In this area here, I think it's here where we have a lot of lighting. There we go. So you can see that message that comes up. And the reason for this is because there's competing lights. All right, that's something that they've done, these guys, just for a demo. It's not supposed to be something that you're, you know, you're using necessarily, but they add a lot of lights to you know, for you to people go through here, just in this area here. So if I go back, you can see that'll pop up again, right? Because this area here has lots of lights. That's per pixel lighting, and as soon as it does, I think it's over here, because we have lights that come from the you know, things like the, you know, the fire, the visual effects that are happening, and there's lights from other areas. As soon as you get into this area here, you can see that it's weird in terms of the way it does its lighting. So real-time lighting, as well as some baked lights and a bunch of other stuff. So that's what this level is about. So this is the level that that we're using. And what I'd like to try and do is transition from this level without creating a new one. I want to kind of use this level to transition from interior to exterior. Okay, that's what we're going to do. And one thing that we can do is we can kind of hunt around here just to look around and see if we can actually look at the level. In terms of size, you know, as an example too, so you can see there's some kind of, in this area here, there's some kind of trigger or collider. Oops, there we go, right here. Let's move that camera speed way down. And so there's your door, and there's this area here. But notice that right when I get to this part right here, right, I can't seem to move forward beyond a certain place because they put a collider volume that's invisible here as well. So that's something that you can't go from this doorway right here. So that's kind of what they've done. And they allow you to explore stuff. But take a look at all these lights. So to me, this is a lot. There's a lot of lights happening. And that's why you're getting these weird warnings. There are ways of improving performance. You know, of course, what you could do is, if your computer's not capable of doing it, your machine, you could pare down some of these lights and stuff like that. Let's just start from there. There we go. And so you could do that, but you could explore this level. It's pretty good in terms of like what they've done to demonstrate. There we go. This is the other side of that. Demonstrate the you know, the all the modular assets that you can use, you know, for your entire, for, you know, to build whatever you want. Okay, that's kind of what this does. So how do I bring this? Now that's the next question. How do I bring this out, right? You know, as an example, how do I bring this out to ambient dust? That's why it's so crazy. So I was looking at that going, wait, well, what? That's a particle system. I like the ambient dust, but imagine you have a particle system in there as well, right? So that does everything. How do I bring this out to the other level? And what we can do, just to make this a little faster, is we can explore the assets we've been given. You know, if we go through doors like this is the exterior door right here, okay? So you can see that if I was to look at it from a side, it's completely black on the outside, okay? Well, what about their lighting? What do they use? So if I look at their lighting, they have a directional light, and they have a bunch of point lights and stuff like that, and skylight and spotlights. But what they don't have is, you know, they don't have a sky sphere or anything else like that. And if you look at some of this stuff, the skylights, the things that they've done, they've tuned some of this stuff way down, you know, and that's how they do it. The one thing they also have, if I look at directional light, just something to look at, is the direction that it's coming from. So it's from below, right? You can see that the rotation of what's happening as well. And if I hunt, you know, as an example here for post-processing, you see that there is a post-processing volume in here. right? So there's map data for post-processing volume. And if I kind of hover over that and look at it, you can see that the scale is 111, but if I go to infinite extents is on. All right, that's one thing that they put in here. So we have to be cognizant of that, that they've done that, okay? That they've added infinite extents. You don't want to do this for your interior level. Your interior level, if it's meant to be something that you're adding into or streaming from exterior to interior, you want to frame, your level, so increase the scale of your post-processing volume so that it fills the level, and that's it. Okay, that's one thing that we're going to be doing. I'm just going to shift back to non-optimized video. So that's something that you're going to do. So you would turn this off. The other thing, if I uncheck this, is priority. So if I type in priority, you can see the priority is 0. Okay, if I have overlapping volumes, you can increase the priority for another volume. So for example, if I wanted this volume to have a higher priority when you're in it, I would change this number to say something like 5. Okay, the higher priority that you would have, then this post-processing volume is going to take precedence over the one that's on the exterior. Okay, so that's something to note. The other thing that they do a lot of times with under the lens category is, if you scroll down, is exposure. So notice that the exposure here is set to 0. So auto exposure, if I actually turn this off, as an example, you can start seeing that auto exposure is on, and you can see what the actual level looks like on the outside. So if I go inside, now you're going to see like crazy lights, right? This is what we're talking about. This is what happens with auto exposure is on, right? Without a post-processing volume that helps out. Okay, so that's one thing that you would note, that it's pretty crazy like this. Okay, one thing I've done, and I recommend you do this if you're going to use any kind of assets like example assets, for your game, is make a copy of the stuff that the people who developed this stuff made, so you don't have to mess up the original. So a good example of that is Dungeon Modular Pack. Under their maps, they have these two maps. One of them is the grid that shows you like all the assets, and the other one is an example map, this one, right? So instead of using this one, I've made a copy of it. I just duplicated it, right? And once you duplicate it, then that way you can change it and do whatever you're going to do, and it's not going to mess up the original. So you can always go back if you mess up. Okay, that's kind of a good way of doing things. So going back to this one, so the first thing I've done is I've unchecked auto exposure, right? So that's what I've done here. I've basically, once you've unchecked this control, once you've done that, now it's auto exposure's on. Now you can also use a histogram, as an example, if you really want to do that, and then you can create almost like a graph to do your auto exposure, the auto exposure yourself. But the two things that you want to do is these two settings right here. So if I put this at 0 for interior, instantly you can see that it kind of climbs. And if I click 0 on this one, but I can make this so that it's like, let's say from 0 to 1 or 0 to 5, let's say. So if I go from 0 to 5, where 5 would be like, kind of a higher level of exposure, you can also increase, you can add these check marks as well, where how long it takes for it to go from one level of exposure to the next. So let's try this out. We'll start in this room. And what I'll do is, one thing to note, if I just type in player, there is no player start anywhere in this level. So I'm just going to, put one in here. Again, I've modified this. If I just type in basic, and if I look at player start, I can kind of pull that in right here. So I have a place where the player is going to start from now on. So this is kind of the area that I've chosen, right at the front door here. I consider this kind of like the big front door of the entire level. Okay. And we're going to pull them back so that it starts kind of way back over here. Just going to do it so my viewport doesn't clip. There we go. So if I press play now with those new settings, you can see that it looks different a little bit. The door is massive. Like from a scale perspective, you can see that the door is like a huge double door. Also, my camera, I've made the camera so that it's fairly tight to the to the character, so that they can go through you know, those kind of things, those corridors and that kind of stuff. But that's really, you know, the auto exposure settings there. So let's go back and let's change this now to, if I go back to post processing volume, post, and if I go to exposure again, it's under this lens category, and it's a subcategory of lens called exposure. You can see that these are values you can use, right, to speed up and slow down things. Again, a nice level, a nice number would be something like, you know, 0 to 1. Sometimes people also use 1 to 1, so there's no transition. If I do that, notice if I just do this, then it's always dark, right? If I go 0 to 0, then notice that it becomes almost like an area that's kind of equalized. So a 0 setting, you know, as an example, it doesn't give you 0 like exposure necessarily. It just doesn't increase or decrease stuff very much. So if I go from 0 to 10, let's go to do that, then you're going to notice that there's going to be some areas that are brighter than other areas. And then we want to use the speed up and slow down, right, to do that kind of stuff. So a good example of that would be if we play again. You can see that as I play, then, and if I kind of run through these areas, and again, it's going to be choppy for you guys because you're watching probably a slow frame rate. You know, let's just go down this way. You can see that the lighting is fairly consistent the entire way, right? Which is pretty good. So that's the kind of thing we want to see in an interior. We don't want, you know, the exposure to ramp up or kind of, you know, kind of tone down automatically for us, because that is a lack of control. So again, over here, you can see that there's an area that is a lot kind of brighter, this area here, than down there, right? And also different kinds of lights with different colors. So here they probably use a rectangle light, a rect light, that's up here at the top. You can't see it, you know, as an example physically for the character, but there is some ambient glow that's in there, okay? And then as we move forward, you can see that the light changes again, okay? So that there's different shadows and lighter areas throughout the entire level, okay? It's not terrible, but it is what it is. Okay, so that's what we want to do. We want to use this level, but how do I use this with my other level? Well, one thing to note is I'm just going to turn my exposure settings off for now so I can see them. So back to this, let's just turn them off. So literally turn these off, and you're going to see it becomes very bright. But I need to, because what I want to see is externally, I want to be able to see the entire level. All right, so that's kind of what the level would look like from an exterior perspective. Right, so I'm kind of just zooming out here, and so you can see how big this thing is. All right, and that's it. That's the level. So what we want to do with our post-processing volume is just encompass the level. So the post-processing volume, instead of it being infinite extents, we want to uncheck this box here. We don't want to make it infinite. Instead, what we want to do is we want to scale this up, you know, as an example, to the right size. So our post-processing volume is at 100, 100, 500. If I double-click onto it, it's right here, okay? So that's where it is. And you can see that we're kind of outside is where this thing is. And it's good to know where it is so that you see it, okay? What we want to do is we want to scale it. Let's move this post-processing volume. This is where it becomes important for us to put it in a spot where we want to see it. We want to see it, so we want to scale this thing so that it encompasses our entire level. So first, let's start with our Z scale. So I'm going to kind of scale it up so we can actually see it, right? And same thing with our, so just bring it up here for a second so you can see, there it is. So let's make it so that we'll say 100. You can see that that is pretty big. So let's move it down to something like 20. That looks about right, 20. And again, I'm looking at I'm using the level that is kind of associated with this modular pack, kind of moving it to the middle. And now let's look at 20 by 20 by 20 to see what that looks like. That's not wide enough. Okay, that's the post-processing volume right now. We want to kind of make it a little bit bigger. So let's say 40. That's too big. Maybe 30. And maybe we can move that thing a little bit. So we just want to cover the level. We don't want to be too much because it'll affect, you'll see how this is going to affect the other thing we're going to do. Okay. So 30, let's say by 40. And maybe even make it bigger than this. Maybe by 50. Yeah, I think 30 by 50 by 20. And let me just see how that works. I'm just going to increase my camera speed here again because it's just driving me crazy. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. In fact, maybe 20 is even too big. Again, we want to try and fit it as much as we can, right? So that way it's not, you know, too big, it's not too small, and it kind of we're right in this volume. That's not bad. That kind of fits our level. Maybe a little bit to the left. More. Maybe even, yeah, we got more room on that side. So again, all I've done is I've removed the post-processing volumes, you know, exposure settings. So that way, that's pretty good. So that way, we can see the levels. The level itself. So now if we go back, what we want next is to change the post-processing. If I go to priority, I want to change this priority to 5. It's going to be a high priority, higher priority than a 0, right? And then what we want to do is we want to go back to our post-processing and go back to that exposure, right? And we want to go back to this. I'm going to go back to what we had before, which is kind of like a 0 and 0 or a 1 and 1 is what we want to do. Now notice from outside, this is kind of interesting. From outside now we can see the level, right? We can see what this thing looks like. But as soon as we dip our head inside of there, it becomes dark. So up here, we can see that it's going to actually show us what it is, right? This is the actual level itself. But as soon as we come inside, boom, we get to darkness. As soon as we're actually physically inside this thing, it goes back to normal. So in here we're good. But out here, once we're outside of the post-processing volume, you can see that we can see the the light from outside. Make sense? Let's save this level. So File, Save All. Now there's two things we can do. Okay, if I'm going to add this level in, I could create an instance of this level, and again, we're going to do more about this later on. I could copy everything too, like copy the entire thing and copy paste it into the other one. But there's just a better way of doing it. And we're going to do that by creating an instance. So let's just hide that. We're going to hide this. And what I want to do is I want to keep the lighting and all that kind of stuff that's in here. And if I select all, so Control A to select all, you can see that everything is selected here, right? As an example. And if I right click, if I go to level, you can see it can say I can create level instance. Create a level instance. Okay. So if I did that, it's going to ask me external actors, the pivot type is Z, that's fine. Always show dialog, yes, is fine. And if I press OK, it's going to ask me to create this as a level instance somewhere else. Now, typically dungeon is, you know, what we have, but we're just going to call this dungeon instance. So dungeon instance, just for this example, okay? So what this does is it creates something that we can use, right? And once we've made this dungeon instance, right, this is our prototype, what we have in here. And the dungeon instance is something that we can use, you know, as an example in other places. So this is notice that it kind of unloads you know, kind of the way this works. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to go back to my project settings, and I had the dungeon in maps and modes. That was my dungeon. But what I want to do instead is I want to load in my exterior level 2. Now you might have called it something else or whatever, but that's what I'm going to call it, level 2, right? So again, this is just the example, right? And so what I'm going to do is load that in. So save all, file, save all. There we go. And let's see what happens with that exterior level that I've got going on. So file, and we'll say open level. It's going to open the exterior level 2. That's what I called it. We're going to see that this goes away. Here's this exterior level. And there's this bad size thing. Where's my player start? It's probably just inside the world there, which is not what we want. A very basic thing. So now what I want to do is I want to add this level instance somewhere. Now how do I do that, right? Because I want to kind of have that, add this to the level. And think about the level instance as a sub-level, if you will. Like if I was to go back to, let's go back to that level instance to show you that one for a second. I'm going to save this one. But if I go back and I want to look at that level instance, so dungeon instance, what does it look like? Right? So it looks like you'd expect, black right now. Because what happens is, here's something that it does. Notice that, I'm just going to go there. Notice that a lot of the stuff that we had in there, right, is gone. So if I was to look at post-processing, notice that post-process, that's gone, right? We don't have that anymore, right? We don't have post-processing effects at all. It's just the level itself. That's what this thing is, okay? So inside here, it's auto exposure, right? Exterior, there's no light, right? And it kind of removed all the lighting and all that stuff when we did the level instance, okay? That's what this thing is. So there is nothing. It's just literally that, just the level itself. There's no post-processing. There's no light at all. So if I actually go to light, there's spotlights, but if I do something like directional light, there's no directional light. There's no skylight. So if I type in sky, you don't see skylights or anything like that. They've all been removed. Okay. What I want is I want to use this instance, this this dungeon instance with my other level. Let's go back to that. So let's go back to that level 2. Here we are. So again, what I want to do here, you can use, if I go back to my window and if I look at my levels, right, here's my persistent level, right? But what I want to do is I can click on add existing. I can also create new, but I can add existing, and if I add existing dungeon instance, this one, then what it does is it adds my level to the world. So there it is. There's that dungeon instance, the whole thing. Okay. Now, one thing to note when it comes to this, okay, is all of it, because the way this level was created is made, right, kind of like piece parts, right? So if I was to take parts away, I can like literally just do one of these, right? I can move parts out. I can move parts in, all that kind of stuff. And the other thing to consider is where it decides to add things in. Now, let's suppose you're not happy with that. If I go back to levels, here's dungeon instance, and notice it says I can open the blueprint for it, right? It also says I can change the level color, so that we can identify what this looks like. Let's say I can make it red. Here's my red level, right? And I could show and hide it. Look at that. Or I can show and hide that whole thing, right? So what we want to do is I can select that level, select it all, right? So I can select and deselect, right? So I can make this the current level. That's what I could do, right? I can select the actors in that level. So that's all the actors. And that's kind of a way of controlling the level itself, right? Notice I also made that weird change, right? So let's just undo that change. So, because I modified it, right? Let's undo that change again. So I was playing around with it. There it is. One more time. There. And so let's go back to that. So window, levels, and then what I want to do is, if I right click and select all the actors, right, then I have control over what I do with it. Because when I select all the actors, there's a pivot point that I get, right? So there's that pivot point right here. So I can move all of it, right? Now it's a lot, so it's going to take some effort to move because you're moving all the actors for the entire level around, right? So that's something that you're just going to move up here, and it's also something that is happening very, very slowly, right? But what we can do is we can move this whole dungeon somewhere else. Like, let's say, for example, maybe at the other edge of the screen there. And what I want to do is, when it's finished updating, let's just increase my camera speed again because it's driving me crazy. We want to move this so that it is, let's say, I don't know, in some flat area, like let's say over here, right? And I want to put my character, my little keep moving it over. It's like a spaceship, so massive. Come on. It's gotta go slow. Yep. All I'm doing is dragging and holding while this is moving up and updating. And what I want to do see it for a second there. I guess I just want to move this. Now, guys, things to note here is this is a very detailed level with lots of lights. That's why it's taking me forever to do this. My system is like, you know, chugging. So if it wasn't that many lights, you know, as an example, it wasn't as crazy as this, then, you know, you'd see that it wouldn't be so bad, right? But the idea here is that I want to make it so that I can see the door. And the door, I believe, is... Where's that exterior door? Not there. I think it's here. Yes, it's on this side. So I need to rotate this because I want the door to the dungeon to be here on the plane. So let's rotate it now. And we're going to rotate this by 90 degrees. Rotate by 90. And actually, you know, the easiest way to do this is, yeah. Yeah, I'm just going to do that change. And I'm just going to go back to the rotation snap, and I'm going to snap it to 90 so that when I rotate once, it rotates it by 90. There we go. And then let's move this puppy out again so that it's kind of showing this thing over here. So here's what I don't want. I don't want my, you know, kind of my landscape necessarily to tie in with this thing, because this is supposed to be a dungeon, right? So what I probably would like is cliffs and that kind of stuff to hide my landscape, right? In this instance, you know, as an example, because it's a dungeon, right? Which means I would build stuff up around it. Just move it back. There we go, a little bit more. I don't know if that's low enough. It may not be. It's actually a little bit too low, which means inside that it'll clip, right? Let's see. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. So let's suppose I put it here. Okay, so then if I put it there and I want to hide this part, I would put cliffs and mountainsides and all that stuff here. So a good example of this is, first of all, let's put the player start. Let's deselect all, right? So I'm not selecting everything anymore, which is going to make me a little quicker. And I want to find the player start. So player start. And now there's two. There's one inside the dungeon and there's one outside the dungeon. So what I want to do is this door that we have in here, it can rotate. So if I kind of rotate this so that it opens, there we go. It's 90 degrees. We'll make it so that the door is open. Maybe not 90, but we'll go to maybe less, like 10 degrees or 5 degrees. Let's do that 5-degree rotation stuff. There we go. So we'll kind of make it so the player can eke through, but it's not going to be something where they're going to be able to necessarily do something like that. So there's the dungeon, and now you can see that unfortunately that is where this is bad size. That means that the floor is clipping with some of this other stuff, right? So we don't want that. And also the player start is inside the floor at this point, because inside the landscape, right? So again, what we can do is we can go to window, and I can go to levels and go here, right click and select actors. That's all the actors in the level again, and then just move back out there and increase that slightly, because we need to do that. So just a touch up, because I don't want it to clip with the ground. I think it needs to come up a bit more. Let's see. Yeah. And again, it's snapping, so it's snapping 10 centimeters at a time. That's what it's doing, so that's fine. Let's just do one more time. There we go. So I don't want it to go too far, but enough that we can get into it. Okay, so now we can go back and change the landscape a bit and make it so that it doesn't clip, but we can build up this area here so that, you know, the landscape kind of comes up here. So that's what I would do next, right? So we have this player start. I'm going to get rid of the player start that's inside. Actually, what I'll do is I'll move it out here, so that way we can see the dungeon while I'm outside. It's facing the dungeon now. You'll see the dungeon doors, right? And then get rid of this one. So the second one, I'll just get rid of it. So no more player start, the second one. And just to try it, to show you what it looks like, you can see that it, wait, I'm in the wrong spot. Where am I now? Just make sure. Yeah, it's not starting me where I want. So let's, you know, because it's in the level. That's right. That's why it's doing that. Because it's in the level, let's undo that change. So undo, put that starter. Yeah, there we go. And then what I want to do for this one is I want to get rid of it. And I want to use the original one, which is way over here. That's why it's starting me over here. Because it's not part of the instance level. And because this is the level that we're using, that's why it's doing the thing that it's doing. So let's move it closer. And I'll use that one. And let's see, I'm probably inside the world there. I am. And am I facing the right direction? I am not. So let's face the right direction. So I'm going to rotate myself so we're facing, grab the wrong one, that way. Okay, and let's try that again. So notice that when I'm here, the level's not here, right? Even though, so I want to show you this, even though when, you know, I've placed the level, if I go back out, you can see that the level is clearly there, right? There's the dungeon instance that's been loaded, right? And I can go to persistent level. This persistent level, I can kind of select actors in either one. So example would be like here, I'm selecting actors in my, you know, this one. Here's my current context that I'm using, or my persistent level, or my dungeon instance. I can kind of switch between the two. If I go back to my level windows, let's go back to that. Here's my level. So here's a lighting scenario that I can toggle on and off, and I can save the level. Now saving the dungeon instance map itself, so it'll actually save it. Any change that I make will be saved now. So if I want to go back to it, you know, the original one, it'll save those things. The other thing I can do is if I right click here, right? So here's visibility, you know, as an example. I can show and hide, right? I can remove if I want to. I can change to the lighting scenario that I want, right? And I could convert level to internal actors, where it says disable selected levels to use external actors and convert their actors to an internal packaging. I can also select streaming volumes here. There's a bunch of options that they give you for making this the way it is, right? So if I click make this the current level, if I do that, so here's the current level that I'm working on, and if I go back and play, and still you can see that there's nothing there that the character can see, right? And I would fall off the world. So it doesn't allow me to do anything, even though it's right in front of him, right? So it's right here, right? So this is an example where the level, even though it's here, right? This level, it's not loaded, right? The dungeon instance is there but not loaded. And what we want to do is when they're close enough, we want to load the level. So this is what we're going to be doing in week 8 as an example. Okay, when we make a you know, kind of level instance. So let's undo this unload the level. So again, it's as easy as going to levels, right? And where it says dungeon instance, I can right click, and then you know, I can remove it, remove the selected level, remove selected levels from the base streaming level. So that's the one thing we can do. And if I did that, it says removing levels can't be undone. Are you sure? Yes. And then once I've done that, the level's gone. Right? Again, there's no difference to what we've done. We can add it in, or we can put it back, and we can use this to size to see where it would be. Okay. So that's one thing that I can do. I can kind of add it in and remove it. But what I want to do is I want to you know, kind of load that level up, right? You know, kind of thing with, I want to open a level, but I want to open it so that I can see it, like the level instance itself. So, so this is some things that I can do, but it'd be nice if, right, that I could take that level instance and then kind of load it in as opposed to the way I've had it before. So what if I went to the dungeon instance itself, right? And if I was just actually going to drag it in like this, what if I did this instead? And you're going to see that it's way over there, okay? But this is different than what I did before, right? So here I just like literally just dragged and dropped it in to my level, right? It's there. Notice that it says persistent level 2. That's my persistent level, right? But it's there. It's like way over there. And take a look at the dungeon instance now. It's one thing. It's one big thing here, as opposed to the way we loaded it in, right? Well, I have control over it again, right? So I can kind of use this handle to move it into place. Now, you can do it the way I'm doing it, or you can do it numerically by dragging it across the, the axis this way, right? So I can kind of move it like numerically. So let's put it at, if I, like for example, if I went to 0, 0, 0, the 0, 0, 0 mark, so if I was to reset it, notice that it put it right here, right back to where I had it. Isn't that interesting? Because I saved the instance. So as soon as I saved the instance, what it did was it put this level back where I put it, right? Kind of neat. And if I press play, now we see the level. Yeah, baby, right? And I can go into that level if I can jump in there, right? If I can get into that level, I'd be able to walk in there. Now there's a problem, and the problem is that, let's just make sure that there's no collider, because the thing is there's a collider that'll stop me from going into that level, right? So let me just go back to here. Yeah, so example would be, notice that I can't go there. It looks like I can walk over here, and I would definitely fall down if I went over here, right? Something to note. Okay, so that's okay, but why then can't I walk through, right? Because this seems to be a level I can get into. Well, if I take my player start just for a second, and let's walk that player start into the door. Remember there was that hidden collider or whatever, right? So there I am. So move myself up a bit. And let's see what this looks like. So if I kind of go from there, now I'm inside this level, right? Here we go. And just like before, notice I can't leave. So I'm inside or outside, but it's like I can't go in there, right? I can be inside here, but you can see here it's like way overexposed, right? Like the outside. So what I want to do, because it's trying to figure out this stuff, is in the dungeon instance itself. So here's my dungeon instance, right? So I can edit it directly, right? So that's something. What I've done is I've kind of placed the actor, my dungeon instance. That's what I've done, right? Frame select, if I go there, it actually frames the entire thing so I can see it. That's the entire dungeon. That's like any frame select, right? So that's like right there. That kind of shows me the dungeon itself, right? So, and that's kind of the whole thing that it's showing me, right? I can also go back to my player start and it'll frame select me as well. Just double click, or F for frame select as well. So that's one thing that dungeon allows me to do is that I can do the same thing I did before, hide and save, right? And here's another thing I can do. I can break the level instance. That's what I can do. I can break that level instance if I want to as well. So level instancing allows me to drag and drop it into a specific spot. But then if I break the level instance, it says, do you really sure you want to do that? If I do that, now it's all part of the same level. Now notice that there is if I click on this part in here, right? So so there is a bunch of doors and crates and stuff like this. And let me just walk through. If I kind of look at, if I go to show, and one thing that we can also show in here, we can look at kind of blocking volumes, right? So if I go hide all, and if I want to show blocking volumes, where I want to show that, then any blocking volume that I'm seeing will come up. Let's try and play this again and see what happens. So there I am. And if I go to here, but notice I can't still go out there, so it's not really, there's a blocking volume that I can't see. It's made from the dungeon itself. That's what they made. I just can't see the blocking volume right now. Maybe you guys can see it better than me. But there is a blocking volume that's right here, and the reason for this is because if I go through, if I just type block, maybe they named it differently. It's just they've made it this way, so you can't cross the boundary, you can't walk through the door, as an example. I wonder if I'm just going to see the large metal door. I want to see what that looks like, and I want to see the mesh just for 1 second. Make sure that it's like, I want to see what the simple collision, yeah. So simple collision, it's not the door. It's not the doors that do it. And again, you guys have these assets too, so you can take a look at them as well. But there is a volume that I can't see. Is it the door frame? Frame. What is it called, Andrew? If you know that that's the way. It's not this. This is the dip end. Let me just go to that one for a second. And I don't think it's this, because I don't think it's a particular thing. Yes, it's not this. It's just something I can't see from a collision perspective. Let's go back and see if I can show collisions. Yeah. It's going to be a little bit bad in terms of the way it works, but let's take a look at this. So that's what it looks like. It looks like that's the frame. Small pillar. This one, you're saying, right? Let's take a look here. Show simple collision. Yes, you're correct. Yeah, because you can see how it's dotted this way. So all we have to do for this one is if we go to remove collision, and just like we've done before, what we want to do is we want to put back our, if I type in collision, and I want to go to, instead of project default, I want to go use complex collision as simple. There we go. Now, we're not going to do it everywhere, but if we just do it here, and if we were to save this and go back to our level, then we should be able to transition across the threshold. Yay! Right? And again, what I would do is I would build back up, again, that area on the outside. Notice that this part right here is part of the world from the outside that's peeking in. You'd have to do a little bit of sculpting to put this level back in. Okay, that's one thing that we're going to do. Now, what we want is a different lighting scenario that's in here compared to out here. Okay, so the way we do this now, if I go to post, and we can turn that stuff off, I don't need to see my collision. All right, that's too much, that's too crazy. But what I want to do is I want to change the lighting scenario. So let's do that. So just like we had before, if I look at post, right, there is only one post-processing volume, and that post-processing volume is on the outside. So if I was to look at it, it's like way over here. Okay, and that post-processing volume is, if I looked at the exposure for this one, it's using auto exposure, which is fine. Okay, so it's kind of using auto everything. And if I look at extents, so infinite, then infinite extents is on, but priority, right, is 0. So what I want to do is the same thing I did before, where if I go to player, go back to that, I want to frame that thing that we had before, that 30 by 50 by 20 or whatever it is, right? So what you can do is add in another post-processing volume, because that one went away when we did the the level instancing. So if I go to volumes, post-processing volume, there we go, and I put that in place, there we go, here it is. And then I want to drive that size up a little bit, so we're going to say that the size is, 20, there we go, I think 20 was about right, and then 30, 20, 30, 50 is what I think we had, right? 20, 30, 50. 20, 30, 50. Now again, things to note. If this volume, the way we have this area crosses over with the other one, you're going to have that lighting scenario that changes, right? Just make sure that we increase our speed here just a touch so we can play with this level a little bit easier. There we go. Just want to look at it from the side here again. 20, 30, 50. Again, I just want to make sure that I'm covering it, and I'm not going outside the bounds. Just so when we play with this level, we're good. Yeah. Looking at it from the top, we're pretty good to go. All right, so this post-processing volume that we're looking at right now, which is what we're looking at, post-processing volume 2, we can rename it. We don't have to name it like this. We can call this post-processing volume interior or dungeon or whatever you want. And this will be post-processing volume exterior or landscape, whatever you want, right? So we can move this in here in light and sky so they're both together so we can find them easily. That's an important thing to do. And then in the interior, let's change our lighting scenario for exposure. Let's change that to, like we said before, the minimum and the maximum from an exposure perspective is lower, like these two values here. We want to go with a lower exposure, like a 1 and a 5, instead of keeping the automatic versions like in there, or a 1 and a 1, or a 0 and a 0. Let's make it 0 and 0, just make it what it was. There's 0 and 0 inside this volume. And the way this would work is as soon as we peek our head in there, like so, notice it darkens. And as soon as I come out, right, then it brightens back up again. So the interior isn't going to be affected because of my post-processing volume the way we had before. So it's going to look nice, right? That's the idea. What we want, though, is we want the priority to be higher. So we shift the priority instead of being 0 to be 5, like we said before. So now if we play the game, notice that's inside, we're pretty good. We can see that the interior is good. Now there's some issues, so I want to talk about the issues as well. But as soon as I come outside, right, and we transition from an outdoor to an indoor, when we cross this threshold, then we're going to see that it brightens up right here, because this is where the post-processing volume ends. And as soon as I go inside, notice it darkens. Take a look at that transition. There to there, right? So that is what we need to control. And the way to control that, of course, is to change the bounds, look at that, of the post-processing volume so it's closer to that interior side, okay? Things to frame would be put mountains and stuff like that around the entrance to this thing so that you can, kind of have, so it can look a little different. But now it looks pretty good. Now there's some other problems. Do you guys notice some of the problems that we have here as I'm walking through? Forget the fact that it needs to be rebuilt, but what other problems can you see? Do you see the problems? Take a look down here, right? I mean, they put it together, but there's a big hole that looks like we're here. Like light is coming in from the outside, right? And that's something that doesn't get blocked, right? So it's not like, you're blocking light. That's not going to happen, right? So we get this area where, first of all, the camera is interesting. The camera might still clip in certain places so we can see the outside. So that's bad, right? And as we move forward, you can see that there's areas, if I kind of do one of these, where I can see like part of the outside inside, like anything that's done properly. Now it needs to be rebuilt. I'm going to rebuild the meshes in a second. But example, this area here, right here. This looks like I'm looking outside, like, and I see the back end of the dungeon. If I don't want to see the back end of the dungeon, then I need to, and this is what's happening here, the light is coming into from one post-processing volume into the other one. So this is actually natural light that's coming in from outside. So not bad, but what we want to do is we want to control this. So what people do is they put a box around these areas, right? Where actually we put a plane that, you know, we cover up the light that comes in from the different areas so that it's blocked off. These are light blockers, right, that we can use. So one thing that we can do for those is some basic shapes where we can use things like a plane. So if I put in like a plane, and you can see this geometry, but we want to use shapes, okay? So plane, and what we want to do with this plane is we want to kind of put it here, so that way we can block the, like, and again, this would not be seen. You wouldn't see any of this stuff because this is on the inside of the dungeon. Again, you'd block this all off with stuff that you would make. So let's change this. So here's my plane, and then we'd scale it up. So we make it so, like, again, we make it so it's 50. Sorry, undo that because planes are flat. I meant 50 by 30, and what this does, let's make it even bigger. Let's make it 100. What this does is it creates a light blocker, right, from this stuff. So this way, it's almost like I'm putting this whole thing in a box. And the smart thing to do, instead of me doing it like this, right, is for us to have this light blocker, you know, in the instant level instance. And so this way it's kind of added in. There we go, something like that. And I would do the same thing. I would kind of duplicate this one and then just rotate it so it's like 90 degrees. Again, it's clipping, but you get the idea here. Want to make it so that this light blocker blocks everything. And I'll just kind of do the same thing here. I'll kind of duplicate, no, undo that. I meant this one. Duplicate this. And we're going to rotate 90 degrees. Almost to create a small little box. We don't need it so large. So let's just scale it this way a little bit. Because we can see that it's clipping the dungeon, but again, it doesn't have to. It just has, as long as it's there and it's blocking those areas, what you'll see and this is an important part, is make sure that we don't see it on that side, is that inside it'll create that that area, right? Now you can change the material. Right now the material is single-sided. You can change it so it's double-sided, and then that would create that the light blocking that we need. But the thing to note is, does it improve the areas that we're trying to hide? So, for example, we probably have to put one under kind of near the bottom as well. And these are things we'd have to test, these light blockers, because we wouldn't want, we don't want to see kind of that natural light from outside, right? Kind of make it into a dungeon. So that area here where we had the light before, notice it's just white now. We don't see that natural light in there. And why? Because we made our light blocker kind of like it's one-sided, but then we make it completely dark, right? Like, you know, and we change the material that we use. Other things that we could, that I recommend you do is build lighting, right? And building the lighting is important in this case because, it needs to be changed, for our level. So, learnings for today, and I don't want to belabor the point more than anything else. When you make your interior to exterior transition, there's some tricks you can use to make this work. And the way I did it was to instance my interior level. I made a level instance. Now I could have kept it the same. I could have brought it in as an example and just dragged and dropped it into place, where you kind of place your level instance, right? That's inside the game, inside the your landscape. Your landscape is the main level, and your level instance is the thing that you bring in. By the way, I can bring in multiple versions of this same instance in different places in my level. The trick would be, we should be smart about this, when we bring it in, we have all the light blocking in place ahead of time, so that all that stuff gets brought in. We've already tested that stuff out ahead of time, so that there's none of this stuff that I'm doing right now. This is unnecessary stuff, right? And the other thing is, if you need to have a facade, like some kind of like cliff faces and that stuff, because that's how you're going to put it in, then you add that into your level instance, and so what happens is that comes in too, right? Anything that you need, you put inside that level instance, and so when you bring it in, the cliff face or whatever you're going to use is there. Otherwise, what you're going to have to do is you'd have to come out over here and then create that facade, right, with your assets that you would need. So for example, I have a bunch of stuff here from Fab. So here's some mega scans, and here's some stuff that I would do. And let's suppose I have this granite cliff face. Let's do this. So here's my, and let's say I brought this in by dragging it in place. It's still building the level. I gotta be patient, my friends, and I'm not patient. My patience is gone when I'm getting older. That's what happens. Andrew's going to say, because you're an old man. See, Andrew says that kind of stuff to me all the time. Right, Andrew? He doesn't even say the whole thing. He doesn't even say yes. He just says, like, why? That's like true lower respect. Let's not even say the whole yes. Just a why. All right. Thanks, Alex. Still missing a single character there. Logan's like, yes, it's too complex. I know, right? All right, so what I want to do is, let's try this now. Let's see if I can bring this in. So I'm going to drag this in. Right, so let's suppose I was going to make this into what I want to do. I would I would kind of increase the size of this thing. Look at the size of that thing. And then kind of rotate this thing around. Yeah, like actually it's perfect. This is a perfect thing. Let's just, no, I'll try it the first time. Kind of make it so that it looks like a cliff face, that kind of would hide this thing here, right? So I'll kind of, make it so it's like this, so you can see that it's like, kind of at the side of the cliff, and you wouldn't be able to see it in there, so you have to clip a little bit, but that's what these things are for. So it looks like this thing is a dungeon, and I would just do duplicate, and let's from a scale perspective, I want it to flip across the y-axis, so we're gonna make a negative scale here. I'm gonna put it like a -1, and then let's rotate it. Did I flip it around the wrong place? I probably flipped it around the wrong one, didn't I? I just wanted to flip the other way. Let's undo that change. I want to do it so that it's flipped completely. Sorry, maybe it's on the x-axis. I need to flip that. Yes. Okay, that's the one I want. And then if I was to change if I rotate it here, now it's going to be slightly different. But you get the idea, right? I mean, I don't have to do this whole thing, but more or less what I'm trying to do here is trying to obfuscate, hide the entrance to this thing and make it so that it's believable in terms of what it looks like. There we go. So get closer and make sure you can't see anything. And we also don't want it to clip, so we don't want it to clip inside here. So that would be bad. And let's just rotate it a little bit more. It's kind of a hidden entrance or whatever. There we go. And then let's make sure it doesn't clip in too much inside there. It's only one-sided anyway, so you shouldn't see it. And then the same thing for the top. So the top would be some other rock or whatever. So we can look at some rocks that we have. There's this part. Let's actually add that in too. And let's just scale that puppy up big. There we go. So kind of something like that. Is it only one-sided? It is. Beautiful. So so we're going to make that so that it kind of goes on the top. But you want to make it so that you're not going to look underneath it, right? So it's going to be like one of those. And we have to scale this a bit more. Yeah. There we go. Kind of a natural looking rock like this. And then you test it out and see what it feels like. So if I press play, you know, here I am on the inside, you know, as an example, and then lighting needs to be rebuilt. Okay, I need to rebuild my lighting one more time. And if I go on the outside, right, then it looks like a big cliff. This is kind of what I want to do. There's, again, you'd have to tweak it a bit more because I can see if I kind of change the angle of my camera, I can see there's areas that I can clip right through. And that's just the lighting. And then also what I want to do in here is I'd want to change the level. So I'd go back into landscape mode, you know, as an example, and I'd probably sculpt that out. So maybe do a flatten. And let's just make sure that I'm modifying everything. Yeah. So I'd probably do a flatten up here. There we go, just a flatten so that I can have everything go in, right? Let's make sure that it's pretty flat. And if I want to, I would sculpt this area a little bit higher so that, you know, it would not clearly see some of those areas right there, right? So I wouldn't want to do that. Okay. And let's move that light blocker as well. So let's go back out of this to selection mode. And let's move that light blocker back a bit and down. So that's not something we can see. Again, it's just a light blocker, so it blocks out some of the stuff that we would have inside the level. But you know, again, see, you need another one over there. Like, you need to work on it. It's not something you just snap your fingers and it's done. It's just like work to be done. But then again, I would probably copy some of these other ones, these rocks. So let's get another one. Let's bring that in, and then we'd increase the size of that one significantly, right? And bring that in and make it like this, right? So then let's make that even bigger. Even bigger. Again, being careful, of course, not to clip in to the dungeon itself, right? Because that would be inefficient of us to do. Yeah, so kind of move it in there, like it's already clipped in to the dungeon, because we don't want that to happen. So kind of like moving it away from this, moving it forward even is okay. Just want to make sure it doesn't clip into the dungeon. Again, things that you won't be able to see, Like you know, we can make this area here, the cliffs bigger, and all that stuff. Like I can duplicate this one and make another one and so on. But you get the idea. I'm hoping. Like a big cliffside, basically. So it looks more natural. Maybe something on the top there would be really cool. Let's just rotate this one. I'm not sure if I like it facing. I think that might be better. Yeah. And this one kind of sticks out that way, and it doesn't clip into the dungeon very nicely. And I can even rotate it, I think, around this side as well. Yes, that's nice. And now I need something on the top. We're good to go. And let's see if we got something. Not really that one. Or this one. There's lots you can find. Oh, that one's good. Okay, let's bring that one in. So, let's scale that one right up. Is that two-sided? It is. Let's rotate that to make it a little bit. Well, actually, it's not. Doesn't look terrible, but it's just there's just a notch there that I'm not really happy with. So we'll kind of make it so it's just rotated this way, so it looks so it's its own thing. There we go. And we just keep doing that kind of thing, right? Until you can also make it so that it's a bit of a wall. There. Let's rotate that puppy. Until it looks somewhat more natural than what we had before. Right? And now you have this little dungeon, and if I kind of press play, you can see that when I go outside, it looks like a dungeon entrance. As an example. Now, I'm not really happy. A couple things. Now that I've been playing with this character, the way I modified them, I'm not sure if I like the. This is the last thing we'll do, guys. I'm not sure if I like the kind of the way that I'm making it work, right? So that's something I could change, right? So here's my character, and right now. My camera boom is only 200. I think the arm length should be like double that. Let's say 450. And if I was to go back, now that might clip into my corridors a little bit more, but at least it's not as bad. I can see it like from here. It's pretty dark in there, and we're going to fix the lighting in a second. But also, what it allows us to do is kind of look and see what this dungeon would look like. And the other thing is that we're also getting clipped because of this. Let's try that again. Yeah. So it's from a perspective of the camera. So we see the dungeon, and then we're going in, and then as soon as we cross the threshold, from a, once we get in there, and this is what we have to be careful about, is it goes from, kind of a lighter scenario to a darker scenario. So we have to adjust the post-processing volume right there, right? You can see that that's where it's going to be done. We're going to move it closer to the door, so there's more of a shadow and overhang, so we can hide what we're seeing. Okay, let's do that. So we'll say build all levels, right? And then that'll build some of the level as well, and then that'll be your thing for today. I'll put this up on DevOps for you, so you have an example. But that is the way you kind of combine both interior and exterior. Maps need lighting rebuilt, which is what it's doing right now. Questions around this before we go for the day? So for your for your interior level for assignment 2, right? Remember that there is a transition that's required for that as well. So this is one thing you can do. Bring it closer, bring it in here. You know, as an example, you want to transition from interior to exterior. Use a post-processing volume. Make it a little bit, you know, kind of tighter in terms of the way it works. I'm just going to wait for this level to be finished building. And then, you know, make it so that the player that's playing the game can't see some of this stuff as easily, because otherwise it's pretty ugly. You want to break the immersion. So maybe, you know, when you're with your level design on the exterior, surround it with cliffs and mountains and all that kind of stuff, or whatever you're going to do, so that you're, you know, if you're making a dungeon like this, if you're just making it so that it's an interior room, like a castle or something like that, and if it sits on top, again, what you can do is you can change what it looks like on the inside, you know, by making sure that the outside has a good post-processing volume, or, you know, it's kind of surrounded by a post-processing volume where you can change the exposure and play with that number, those numbers that I talked about, because those are the things that you need to adjust in terms of lighting, right? So I'm just waiting for this to be built. But overall, this is the scenario that you want to do. We're going to get into the point where, like, if I go back to window levels, notice that there is only one persistent level. But later, what we're going to do with you know, kind of this idea of streaming, is we're going to make it so that when you go in here, it streams this level in as you get closer, and when you're far away, that's not there. Now, there's a lot of issues, like the way they've done this stuff. You can see it says light map UV are overlapping. That's nothing to do with me. Please adjust content, enable error coloring to visualize. These are all things that were made from the level itself. Well, let's see if it's going to give me still that error that we get before. There we go. So that's kind of the interior. Right, so it's pretty dark. And then we go to exterior, you know, we can see that it streams. And once we go to here, because we're outside of that area, the bounds, it's pretty bright. So from brightness to darkness, and we're going to see the extreme right there. Right? And what we want to do is we want to move that post-processing volume. So here's that, you know, kind of the interior post-processing volume, so we can see it. And there's the breakpoint right there. We're going to move that kind of closer in, like right to the doorway. So it's a bit of an overhang. There we go. Even more. Let's try this out. And by the way, there's one more thing you can do, which I think is pretty good. What we could also do is you could have a third post-processing volume. So again, it's where the camera is. So notice the camera right now is moving from interior to exterior. We're pretty bright. And then right now, again, there's some adjustments I could have done here on the plane. Notice that's not quite sitting where I want it to. But as we move from exterior to interior, that's too drastic, right? So what you could do, because see how it brightens up when we're here? That means we could make an adjustment on almost like a threshold post-processing volume, where we can adjust the color values. Because like once I do this with my camera, it goes dark again. If I come from out here, it's light again, right? And it's all down to how we transition from the camera as it moves from inside to outside the post-processing volumes. All right. So again, what that means is, interior-wise, if I go to this, we have 1 and or 0 and 0. We can go 0 to 5 or 1 to 5, let's say, right? And then what we can do is we can change the time, right? You know, as an example, that it would kind of bring that in. Let me just make that change and see what that feels like. File, save all. And let's see if it's too bright. Yes, it's way too dark. And let me just do that again, and then we'd have to rebuild our lighting again, our lighting model one more time. But it's getting there, right? So it's like, you know, and by the way, you can always check and see. Is this more detailed? No, I mean, you do need to do it's not level of detail, you have to manage the transition, the post-processing volume, moving from light to dark. You can also do it with lights, and you can also do it with a trigger. So when you trigger, you can change the lights that go from exterior to interior, but the post-processing volume is like a trigger that's automatic. So what you need to do is play with these numbers, right? So again, if I was to look at the thing, it says maximum is 20 and minimum is -10 with a 3 up and a 1 down, right? What you could do is with this, you could move this in instead of 5, it could be something like 10, just to increase what this might look like. So if I was to do this, but again, you have to rebuild you'd have to rebuild the light, because see how dark it is in here once you start doing that, because minimum was 1, so it becomes really rather dark really quickly, and you don't want that, because what you do is when you transition from interior to exterior, you want to make it so that it's a smooth transition. Interior to exterior was fine, but exterior to interior, that's where it became like dark like that. See, so once I move that camera out, right, see that? We don't want to make it such a contrast, right? From one thing to the other. Questions around this stuff? Well, my friends, so just a reminder then, assignment 2 is now due Sunday, not Friday. So you have a couple more days, because I know people were asking for more time. And that's all assignments. Assignment for this one, for AI, for the other one, it's a couple days. I've pushed it out to Sunday just to make sure that you have a couple days you can work on it, to alleviate some of that pressure. I know I delivered some of my stuff on Saturday, so that kind of pushes it out a little bit to give you the whole week. And then around Sunday, Monday, like I said, I will release the exams for next week for all 3 courses. And you'll have a chance to do them at your leisure, whatever time makes sense for you. Remember, the exams are individual and all that stuff, but I'll talk about that in my little videos I'll make for you. All right, so if there's no more questions, guys, thank you so much, and I will see you tomorrow. All right, take care. I'll stop recording now.